A top commander with the Islamic Jihad militant group in Gaza has reportedly been killed in an Israeli airstrike. The death of Hussam Abu Harbeed comes as the conflict between Israel and Islamist militants rages in the enclave. The Israeli army said Harbeed was behind several anti-tank missile terror attacks against Israeli civilians. This included one attack on the first day of the current round of fighting that the army said had injured a civilian in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that attacks in Gaza are continuing at full force and will take time.
The aftermath of Israel's latest airstrikes on Gaza. Residents are left picking through the rubble that used to be their homes. They say the attacks were the most ferocious yet. We were certainly scared, especially the children. We feared they would be wounded, that they would die or be buried under the rubble. Israel says it's aiming to destroy terrorist infrastructure and is targeting militants. The army later released footage it says shows strikes killing a senior Palestinian militant commander. Israel's jets also targeted an underground network of tunnels used by the militants in their early morning raid. A residential complex in the city of Ashdod hit by a Hamas rocket. Hamas has kept up its barrage in southern Israel. Not all missiles are intercepted by Israel's defences. As the bombs keep falling, the international community is becoming increasingly alarmed. The US says it's working to defuse the situation.
The United States remains greatly concerned by the violence, by the escalating violence. Hundreds of people killed or injured, including children being pulled from the rubble. We'll continue to conduct intensive diplomacy to bring this current cycle of violence to an end.
But as the killing continues, violence, fear and loss remain an everyday experience for these children in Gaza.
DW's Tanya Kramer is covering this story for you, and she joins us now from Jerusalem. Tanya, we understand that Gaza has come under heavy bombardment again. What's the latest information you have for us from the enclave?
Well, on the one hand, as we speak, we had some rocket alerts, so incoming fire from the Gaza Strip towards southern communities and cities in Israel. But there have also been, again, a very heavy night of bombardments in the Gaza Strip, and during the day, airstrikes. I just talked to some people there on the phone. What is also very concerning there is now the humanitarian situation. It is a sealed off enclave for many, many years. There are a lot of shortages anyway, but people are saying they're having now only about 3 hours of electricity. Power lines were apparently are not working properly. They haven't worked before either, but now they're cut down again, and that also affects water and sewage and everything else. And also there has been no humanitarian corridor now. This is the 7th or 8th day soon of this campaign, 1 week, and they need new supplies to come in as well from the humanitarian side.
Tanya, Israeli Prime Minister Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu said yesterday that the conflict would take time and will continue at full force. Is there the political will to look for a way out?
Well, at least in the public statements, we're hearing that the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, has said that very clearly again yesterday. They feel they still have the support of many countries, the international community, especially also from the US, to continue the military campaign. We could assume that also there are domestic considerations in this equation. There's a lot of pressure here to achieve something with this campaign, not just to stop in the middle, as some people here have told me, to have a decisive victory, so to speak, and to end it once and for all. It's not quite clear what is meant by this. And also the military has said they want to continue as long as they can continue to degrade all the military capabilities of Hamas and Islamic Jihad.
Now, Tanya, in conclusion, calls for ceasefire are growing. What can you tell us about any diplomatic efforts that are underway?
Well, it's very hard, to get any solid information at the moment. There are a lot of reports. We know the United Nations Special Envoy here in Jerusalem is in talks. That is also the traditional role here. But also, first and foremost, Egypt is usually the mediator here between Hamas and Israel. They're well-established channels. They have done this before. And we are expecting them also to mediate in this regard, in this matter again. And also the U.S. envoy that was sent here, Hadi Amr, is also still on the ground. So there are a lot of different efforts, but it's not so tangible at the moment when there would be a breakthrough.
DW's Tanya Kramer reporting. Tanya, thank you for your tireless coverage. I greatly appreciate it.
I'm joined now by Jeremy Isakharov. He's Israel ambassador to Germany. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming in today. Yesterday was one of the deadliest days since the fighting began. What needs to happen for the bloodshed to end?
Well, basically, what should have happened in the beginning? The Hamas should not have attacked Israel with now over 3,000 rockets. And this started last Monday with a salvo against Jerusalem and has continued throughout the week. And this has been one of the most intense attacks on Israeli population centres that we've had, even though there have been previous exchanges. And so bottom line is what needs to happen is that this has to stop. And we are doing all in our power to protect our citizens, to intercept these rockets, and to ensure that these rockets are not only fired today, but also in the coming months and years.
Now, especially in the past week, what has shocked the world was the civilian casualties in Gaza. How would you respond to people calling Israel's operation disproportionate?
Well, first of all, I think, as I said, that the attack by Hamas on Israel with such a heavy number of rockets and missiles, and again, let's not forget, these are embedded in the Palestinian infrastructure and they are targeting Israeli civilians and cities. I want to also emphasize one thing. Virtually, in our estimation, 20 to 30% of the rockets also fall within Gaza and they kill Palestinians. So I think that when people talk about the situation in Gaza, first and foremost, they should come to Hamas and say, why did you start this horrific exchange? Who needed it? What are you trying to achieve? Is Hamas trying...
Now the damage is done, isn't it? Now
no,
the
but
fighting
it's not.
has
The damage is done and has to be prevented again. What was Hamas trying to do? To make peace with Israel? To bring Israel into a peace process which they don't believe in and which they're trying to undermine? To help the Palestinian Authority, who they're trying also to undermine? It just did not, have any sense. So, I mean, when you ask me today as an Israeli diplomat, what is the logic of this carrying on? I ask, what is the logic of it happening in the first place? And there, one must really come in full force to Hamas and have them explain themselves in that sense.
A couple of days ago, the Israeli military attacked a building that housed some international media houses, Al Jazeera and AP. I'm going to quote an AP statement saying the world will know less about what is happening in Gaza because of what happened there. Was the real purpose of this airstrike to prevent international reporting on what is happening in Gaza?
No, to the best of my knowledge, no. And everything I can see on television, whether it's on CNN, Al Jazeera or the other stations on Deutsche Welle, I don't think there's any lack of coverage, and we wouldn't do that in order to stop coverage. We had very clear information about the facilities that were being serving Hamas in terms of their intelligence capabilities, their cyber capabilities, and also very particular equipment. And I'm pretty sure that not everyone realizes the extent to which Hamas, again, embeds itself in the civilian population in order to try and have a human shield. So if anyone should come to any complaints here, it should be to Hamas. What they did was no less of a war crime than fighting and shooting against Israeli civilians in Israel.
Now, with all of this, the international community is asking for a ceasefire, but Prime Minister Netanyahu says the fighting will continue until calm is restored. How far is Israel willing to go?
Look, we didn't seek this exchange, and essentially I think you need, again, Hamas needs to cease the rocket fire on Israel, and until it does, Israel will not desist in defending its citizens. So, I mean, the question has to be addressed to them. And as far as what I'm concerned, I do not see this as something that has to be protracted without end. Eventually, it'll come to a close. There are a lot of different conversations happening now.
What are the conversations that are
There are conversations between the Americans and Israel. We also have very open channels between the foreign minister of Germany, who's speaking to Qatar, speaking to Egypt, and he's also speaking frequently to Gabi Ashkenazi, the foreign minister. And I also believe there'll also be very continuing high-level discussions that will go on in the coming hours.
All right. We've seen a flare-up in sectarian violence in Israel over the past couple of days. How worried are you about the growing rift in your country?
First of all, I'm worried because I saw, actually, in the last months, a growing desire by the Israeli Arab community to be more and more involved in Israeli politics. And you could see this in a range of things that happened after the last election and possibilities of coalition. I thought this was an incredibly important development. I think Hamas is very scared of any type of Israeli Jewish-Arab conciliation. So this is a byproduct of the exchange, which has caused riots in mixed cities, which up till now have been a very major example of coexistence. So I am concerned about it, but I believe, living in Jerusalem and having many Palestinian and Israeli Arab friends, that the ones who are interested in quiet, which are the vast majority of Jews and Arabs, will want to reassert their right to live in peace and in coexistence. So ultimately, I think that that is what will prevail.
All right, let's talk about the situation here in Germany. Over the weekend, we've seen a series of pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Some of them saw altercations and were overshadowed by anti-Semitic rhetoric. Is the German government doing enough to curb this kind of behavior?
Well, I think, first of all, I've spoken to some of the initial incidents of concern were in North Rhine-Westphalia. I spoke to Armin Laschet, Prime Minister of the state, and he was very concerned about it, and we discussed, and he assured me that they will do all in their power to prevent it. Other senior security officials spoke to me and also assured me that they will do all in their power. Look, some of these things of fighting against, Jewish communities, confronting them, attacking synagogues, burning Israeli flags, these are things, it's one thing to have a peaceful demonstration, but another thing to have these type of acts, which really, the Jewish community in Germany has nothing to do with the crisis going on in Gaza. And they are deserving of living like any other community in Germany in peace and security. And I, based on what I have heard also from President Steinmeier, who spoke out very loudly against these attacks, also from what I've heard from Horst Seehofer, the Minister of Interior, who came out against these attacks, and he said, we will use all in our power to stop these type of anti-Semitic attacks. So from that point of view, I feel the German authorities will do all they can to prevent.
Are you currently concerned about the security of Israelis and Jews here in Germany?
Look, I'm always concerned, and as I said, I think that these communities should live quietly and in peace. And I must say, I don't want to paint the picture just negatively. We've also had demonstrations of support and solidarity from Israel, not only from the all walks of life in Germany, but also from even local Arab Muslim leaders. And I think that's important to remember. There've been support in Leipzig, in Frankfurt, and even in Berlin. Last Friday, there was a meeting with the Minister of Justice, Christina Lambrecht, with the Minister of Culture, Monica Grütters, and also the head of the Green Party, Annalena Baerbock, that came to express their support and to very much negate any form of anti-Semitism against Jews in Germany. And I think that is also a very strong sense of sentiment that I feel very, at least, reassured by.
Ambassador Jeremy Isakharov, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.